Today is a big day for our family. Our eldest daughter turned 50, so I congratulate her. I know she's listening to me. So I congratulate her, her children, and her mother, of course. That's it. But today I'm going to tell you about something else. And on February 28, 2026, the supreme leader of Iran is sitting where he thought was the safest place, in his fortified compound in Tehran. On the inside, the scene looks, well, almost idyllic. The elderly leader is surrounded by loyal people, with ministers, commanders, and advisors nearby. In other words, all those who have spent decades building and maintaining the system called the Islamic Republic of Iran. They discuss plans, strategies, wars, the economy, and the future. All of this takes place in a building that both symbolically and literally is supposed to be inviolable. They discuss plans for the future, not knowing that Anushka has already set things in motion. But to be semantically precise, Anushka is a squadron of Israeli planes, and instead of setting things in motion, it took off. Somewhere deep inside this complex, Khamenei has what he considers his last refuge, 2 deep underground bunkers where he goes down for the night and only comes up to the surface for short and carefully planned intervals. Concrete, armor, elevators, and the security system, all of this creates the illusion that nothing can reach the supreme leader. For decades, the regime has convinced its citizens that even if the enemy is at the gates, the center from which power emanates, the center of authority, will remain intact.
В безопасности.
But the reality of that day turned out to be completely different. Hundreds of miles from Tehran, in the skies over the Middle East, a squadron of Israeli F-15s received final coordinates from command. The pilots know where they're headed. They know which targets have been designated. They know that the man they are about to eliminate believes he is completely safe. They know that his security system has long been destroyed, but now it doesn't just work for him anymore. Which is a complete surprise for us as well today. Today we'll tell you how the Ayatollah's horses were shod, or rather re-shod, right on the move. The supreme leader of a country with a population of 92 million people, by the way, has about 2 hours left to live. From this moment, the story stops being just a military story. It turns into a story about how a regime built on fear, control, and confidence in its own inviolability became the target of a subtle, years-long operation in which its own cameras and towers served as guides for enemy missiles and strikes. Notice its own cameras, its towers, its own surveillance system was now watching it. He was warned. He was warned. Don't get involved with the Jews. Just don't get involved. He didn't listen. The most interesting part begins after the concrete turns to dust, because a physical strike on the complex triggers a political blow to the elites. Inside Tehran, a struggle begins over who will be blamed. First, who will turn out to be the traitor, and who will try to present himself as the savior of the nation at a moment when the nation has just discovered how vulnerable it is, like spiders in a jar. The smoke over the compound hasn't even cleared yet, and a war is already starting within the Iranian political elite. On the surface, it looks like a stream of statements, interviews, and hints. Inside, it's a struggle, a tough struggle between clans where each faction tries to blame the tragedy on its competitors. The hardliners and the security forces, those who are used to seeing themselves as the backbone of the regime, quickly find a convenient target. Civilian politicians. One of the loudest voices in this group, among the hardliners, is Amir Hossein Jafari, a figure from the super camp. I don't even know how to put it. Yes, the unyielding bastards, I would add to that. He publishes a statement directly accusing President Masoud Pezeshkian and the Speaker of the Majlis, Mohammad Bagher Galibaf, saying that it was their decision that brought this upon the country, to the situation in which the death of the Ayatollah became possible. Beautiful, isn't it? Their decisions brought the country to the state in which the death of the Ayatollah became possible.
Можний.
According to him, it all starts with what he calls economic surgery. That's the closest translation into Russian that I could come up with. So Pajekian and Galibov, they tried to carry out painful reforms, cutting subsidies, changing the rules of the game, touching those areas that had been taboo for decades. The regime, used to stagnation, is now facing forced change. It simply couldn't continue as before. Damn, it would have burst from the inside. For the hardliners, this is a convenient moment. They can declare all this reformist, as they call it, activity criminal. And Jafari lays out his line of reasoning simply and emotionally. People need emotion and simplicity. Step 1. Reforms and surgical interventions lead to the January crisis, a surge of social and economic tension. Step 2. The crisis weakens the country. It makes it vulnerable to external threats. You feel it, right? It's already hard. Step 3. A weakened country enters a war where the enemy gets the opportunity to strike at the very center. And step 4. All this leads to the death of our beloved Korbchev, or Korbchego, what was he called? Khamenei. In this logic, it doesn't matter who exactly pressed the button. Let the missiles launch. What matters is that civilian politicians created the conditions that made this possible. That is, they acted together with the worst people on Earth. And who are the worst people on Earth? It's the Jews and the Americans. In addition, Jafari hints at negotiations with a murderer. And by that, well, he doesn't really mean what he says. He just means contacts with external players, with Western countries, first and foremost the USA. So any contact with those who are responsible for the death of our beloved leader is considered betrayal. You've already figured that out. Any attempts to talk about sanctions, easing pressure, or any kind of agreements in his rhetoric turn into suspicious contacts with those who ultimately struck the blow. Again, I'm quoting our beloved supreme leader. All of this is presented as a moral accusation. You didn't just manage the economy poorly, you were actually communicating with those who were plotting this murder against us. Or maybe you took part in planning the murder. Maybe you are traitors, or maybe you are against the Islamic Revolution. Well, and so naturally the direct conclusion after that, or maybe they are against Allah. From these questions, it's just a step to burning at the stake, or the guillotine, or crucifixion, just to the execution of the whole family. It's just one step. From the point of view of facts, you can understand that this remains just a statement by one person, even if it's a high-profile one, and not the result of any official investigation. But an investigation isn't even needed. What matters is to stir up the people. No court has delivered a verdict, no tribunal has presented any documents, and yet everyone is already nervous. But in Iran's political system, which is used to living in a state of constant factional conflict, such statements work like a weapon. I would even say like a match. Or like gasoline before you throw the match. I don't know how to put it more precisely. They create an atmosphere in which civilian leaders start to be seen as people whose decisions are dangerous, whose willingness to engage in dialogue with the outside world is suspicious, and whose reforms, by the way, can even be equivalent to betrayal. You have to stay away from them. Otherwise, they might destroy you along with your family and friends if you get too close to them. For the military wing, of course, this is a gift. Instead of answering uncomfortable questions like, why did our air defense fail to detect either the Israelis or the Americans at all, they shift the discussion to the question, who undermined the stability of the system and who allowed the country to be weakened? Rhetoric about economic surgery, negotiations with Ukraine, and murderers becomes a convenient smokescreen. It allows them to hide their own failures behind loud accusations against those who deal with the economy and politics. At the same time, Pezeshkian and, well, Galibov themselves end up in such a difficult situation. To defend themselves openly means to enter into direct confrontation with the hardliners and the military, which is very dangerous. as they control a significant part of the security forces. I would say almost all of them. To remain silent means to agree with the narrative of your own guilt. Aha, you have nothing to say, you're silent, and so on. In the end, they choose such a cautious approach. Whether it's right or wrong, as they say, only Allah will judge. Some talk about a years-long crisis and sanctions. Some emphasize the need for reforms, but no one dares to say directly, "Guys, you are damned because of the war, and now you're trying to blame it on the economy, on us. No way." As they say, not a chance. Or something else similar to not a chance. This internal battle over how to interpret events will go on for a long time. Well, unless something very heavy comes down on them from above and crushes them. But to understand why it even became possible, we need to go back to how exactly the strike was carried out. Because it's a fairy tale. Checkmate in 1 minute. Decapitating a regime is not just about one successful missile. It's about combining technical power with an understanding of human weakness. The strike on Khamenei is an example of a brilliant operation where hardware and data work together. At 6:30 in the morning, Israeli time, an F-15 Eagle squadron takes off. On the ground, it looks like just another combat mission. For the pilots, it's the culmination. It's a turning point in their lives, and in a scenario that has been developed, practiced, postponed, and practiced again for many years, they know they're not just flying to bomb infrastructure, they're flying to strike a symbol. A person whom the regime has portrayed as untouchable for decades. F-15 is a plane with a history. It's over half a century old, but every decade new systems are added to it. New radars, new capabilities. It can almost climb vertically to altitude, reaching speeds of, I think, about 2 or 2.5 Mach. That is, more than 1,900 miles per hour upwards. And at the same time, it can serve as a platform for precision-guided missiles. For this mission, it's equipped not with the standard set of short-range missiles, but with dozens of Sparrow missiles. These are air-launched ballistic missiles designed for pinpoint strikes, using coordinates. I remember when we used to fire from cannons. Oh, when we hit a 200 by 200 square, 200 meters by 200 meters, everyone was terribly happy. Well, from 12, 15, 18 kilometers away, in pairs, awesome. But here, when the pilot presses the release button, the Sparrow doesn't fly straight. It goes up into the upper layers of the atmosphere. There it takes the required trajectory. It orients itself using military GPS and its internal inertial navigation system. Then it turns around. Gentlemen, it does all of this by itself. You launch it, and it does all of this, and then it falls down. It should fall. It rushes down at hypersonic speed. With proper preparation, it can hit a target the size of a table. Not 200 by 200 like I shot in 1975. And even that was amazing. 200 by 200 meters. Into a table. And from what distance? 1,000 kilometers. You understand it's not 18 like I used to shoot back in my day. 200 by 200 and the table, one table from 1,000 kilometers away. It's not just about how smart it is, it's about how accurately it was given the coordinates. This is exactly where the second weapon comes into play. Information. Planes and missiles are the final phase of the operation. This is the final phase of the operation. They need to have prepared data on exactly where the target will be, who will be nearby at what moment, which buildings will contain key figures. Without this, an F-15 or a Sparrow is just an expensive piece of metal. But thank God we had this information. The target who was afraid of everything. Khamenei spent many years building his life around one idea, survival. He understood that he was target number one. Since the era of Saddam Hussein and the first serious conflicts in the Middle East, Iranian leaders have gotten used to the fact that they could be attacked. But in the 21st century, this threat has become much more concrete. Under his compound in Tehran, Khamenei built 2 underground bunkers. These are not just shelters, they are entire mini-complexes. They go deep underground. Special elevators lead to them. The descent takes more than 5 minutes, even at high speed. The doors are armored. The walls are designed to withstand an impact. The life support systems are autonomous. In his view, these are places where no missile or special forces can reach him. After the war in June 1925, when Israel attacked Iranian military and nuclear facilities, killing a number of high-ranking commanders and eliminating key scientists, the paranoia only intensified. Khamenei almost disappeared from public view. He stopped appearing in public regularly. At most, there were rare, carefully controlled appearances. No one knew about this. It seemed accidental, but it was prepared very carefully. He spent most of his time in bunkers. For foreign intelligence agencies, this meant a much more difficult task. The target rarely went outside. In such conditions, you can't just catch the leader. You can't just sit and wait for him to show up. A random strike doesn't work here. You need precise information about when he'll be on the surface, when the key figures will be gathered in the complex, and when the bunker doors will be open. All of this requires understanding, schedules, habits, surroundings, which means penetrating the routines inside the complex, the eyes and ears of Tehran. By that time, Tehran had already turned into a city that actively used cameras and digital technologies to control its population. Traffic monitoring systems, cameras at intersections, video surveillance in central areas, all of this is part of the city's infrastructure. The regime believed that this way it kept its citizens under control. It sees who goes where, who travels where, who gathers, who protests, Israeli agents. They decided to play their game, but with a different goal. If the regime has an all-seeing eye, it should be made to look not only at the citizens, but also inward at the regime itself. And so that the image from this eye doesn't go to Iranian data centers, but directly to the Israelis. The Israelis hacked into Tehran's city surveillance system. It's not just a single camera at the gate of a compound. This is about access to a network of cameras that covers the central districts of Tehran. It controls traffic, monitors the flow of cars and people. Special attention was given to Pasteur Street, the location of the compound. Here is the Supreme Leader's very compound that was later bombed. From this moment on, every entry, every car entering Pasteur, every person coming out of the building, every motorcade, every truck, stops being just an element of city life. They become data. The cameras that Iran installed to monitor its citizens are now working for Israel. I don't know if the cameras enjoyed it or not, but they worked. This data is collected and analyzed. Drivers' routes, where they go in the morning, where they go in the evening, their regular stops, security shift schedules, who comes to the posts and at what time, how often they are changed, and on which days. A tighter schedule, the habits of advisors and officials, who arrives first, who stays late, who comes only for key meetings. All these details come together to form a picture. Seemingly minor things are added to this as well. When the trash is taken out, when food is delivered, from where, when the lights are turned off in certain parts of the complex. For good intelligence, there are no insignificant details.
Детали.
But a single visual feed is not enough. The world has long operated not just through sight, but through signals too. That's why the Israelis go further and gain access to the cellular infrastructure around the posts. The local towers servicing the phones inside the compound become another source of information. By analyzing the phone movement logs, you can see who and when was near the compound, which phones appear at the same time and which disappear, who meets with whom, and how long they stay near each other, combining streams. Merging video data streams with cellular network data provides a much deeper picture. Now you can see not only who entered the door of the compound, but also how that person moved around the area before and after, who they had contact with, and within what time frame. By adding to this the daily routine of Khamenei himself, gathered from other sources, you get an almost complete behavioral profile of the targets. Meanwhile, the CIA is pursuing its own line of inquiry. The Americans are tracking the movements of Ayatollah himself, his internal schedule, his habits, the moments when he prefers to come upstairs and when he stays in the bunker. The two intelligence communities, which have traditionally worked closely together, exchange data and analysis. What comes out is what matters to the missile operator. A list of possible time windows. When the leader is upstairs, when he is surrounded by the maximum number of key figures, and when the strike will have the greatest effect. The day when the spiders crawled out of the cracks. On this basis, something that analysts call an anomaly eventually appears. An anomaly is exactly what you need to grab onto. Based on the combination of videos, video data, phone movement data, and information from sources inside the regime, it becomes clear. A major meeting is scheduled at the complex for February 28th, and not somewhere deep inside, but right at the top, on the surface. This meeting is unlike regular gatherings. The guest list impresses even experienced analysts. The IRGC commander Mohammed Pakpour, the man responsible for the Guard Corps, Defense Minister Aziz Nasirzadeh, formerly a civilian position but with very close ties to the military, Admiral Ali Shamkhani. He is a key figure in matters of national security. Commander of the IRGC Aerospace Forces, Sayed Maji Musavi. The one responsible for missiles and space programs, Deputy Minister of Intelligence Mohammad Jirazi, representative of the intelligence services. Plus the family, the son Mashtaba, who many have long considered as the successor, and the daughter Boshra. For the operation planners, this is an almost perfect set. Well, I would say almost, perfect. It was a rare day and a huge gift for Israeli intelligence. According to tradition, quite a lot of tomato juice was drunk. At once, you can strike at the supreme leader, the military command, key political and intelligence figures, and at the same time at the symbolic heir. The only question is, will all of them really be upstairs? Will they really cancel the meeting at the last moment? According to available information, the CIA is receiving confirmation from inside. The meeting will take place later. There are no reschedules or changes planned. The CIA has something similar in its closest circle. They have someone on the inside, a window of opportunity, a date, time, list of participants, and location. Before that, they plan to start military action to launch a strike on Iran at night. This format is familiar. With less civilian traffic, it's easier to operate at night and there are fewer random witnesses. But when it becomes clear that all the top officials will be upstairs during the day, the night plan is no longer optimal, and the decision is made to strike during the day. It's risky in terms of visibility, but perfect in terms of impact. Well, Israel has another trick up its sleeve. They had never used it before. A complete shutdown of any communication within the Khamenei complex and the surrounding areas. Complete. Everyone's communications.
Задача?
The task is simple and incredibly difficult. We need to make it so that even if someone in another part of the country, on the border, in the air, or at sea, realizes that the Israelis are starting an attack, he physically shouldn't be able to convey his suspicion to those sitting in the complex. Because for those sitting there in the complex, nothing at all should be working. What could they use to receive information? Absolutely nothing. I want you to understand the level at which all this was happening. Imagine the Kremlin in Moscow, right? And there's a kilometer of buildings around it on all sides. Residential, office buildings, intelligence agencies, and so on. And at the moment when Israeli planes, let's say, set course toward the Kremlin itself, from that very moment, inside that circle with the Kremlin at the center, no one would be able to receive any information, absolutely none, from anywhere. Approximately the same thing happened in Iran. A digital vacuum. That's exactly why another layer of the operation is launched, a strike against the communication infrastructure. In an ordinary city, especially in the capital, communication is the nervous system. Phones, internet, radio networks, local channels, all of this allows information to move instantly. If someone from the military sees something strange on the radar, he can make a call. If someone in the complex hears a rumor, he can check it. If an outside ally wants to warn them, they can dial the number. On the day of the operation, the area around Pasteur Street, at the moment when Israeli planes receive the final go, is deprived of this nervous layer. Cellular networks in the immediate vicinity are disabled. This isn't just poor coverage, it's jamming, a complete signal block where the phone might show a network, but calls don't go through, messages aren't sent, and data isn't transmitted. The area turns into what's called a digital desert. Anyone who tries to call the Khamenei complex at that moment hears jamming. Anyone from the complex who tries to contact the outside encounters radio silence. If somewhere deep inside the Ministry of Defense or in the Air Defense headquarters there is an officer who sees something alarming on the screens and wants to warn others, he can't do it. He can't reach the recipient under any circumstances. This solves two problems at once. First, it deprives the complex of the ability to receive a warning from outside, from those who may not have participated in the operation, but let's say could have noticed it. Second, it limits the possibilities for coordination within the area or from this area to the outside. The guards, commanders, and personnel are deprived of their usual means of communication. While they figure out how to do it, while they sort things out, in the event of a sudden strike, their reaction becomes completely chaotic. And it worked. When F-15 enters Tehran's airspace, the city is just going about its business. No one suspects anything, cars are driving, shops are opening, people are going to work. By this time, the key figures have already gathered at the Khamenei complex. The motorcades have arrived, security is at their posts, the doors are closed. The Ayatollah himself is in a separate building, but that no longer matters. The F-15's combat load is calculated to level the entire complex to the ground. The entire complex to the ground. Strike. At 9:40 in the morning, the active phase begins. Israeli pilots launch the Sparrow, and dozens of missiles are launched along pre-calculated trajectories. They ascend, turn, and approach the target. And in seconds, they turn concrete buildings that were considered the heart of the regime into complete, absolute ruins. According to the former head of the counterterrorism department of Mossad, all of this takes approximately 60 seconds. 1 minute during which decades of work to create an image of invulnerability become absolutely meaningless. On the ground, this minute stretches out. People hear several explosions, see flashes, and feel the shockwave. A column of black smoke rises above the city center, and it becomes clear to everyone that something very important has happened. It has just happened. Khamenei himself died instantly. At the age of 86, he meets his end where he thought he could survive any blow. In his own fortified compound, his son Mojtaba, who is destined to become the new supreme leader, turns out to be among the few survivors. Literally a moment before the strike, he goes outside. He seems to be seriously wounded. He loses his father, his wife, his son, but he survives. Perhaps someday in Iran they will start investigating why the son left the compound. Well, just at an amazingly convenient moment. Well, just between you and me, he absolutely hated his father. Our Mojtaba, he's a homosexual, the active partner, who was despised and pressured in his family. They always pointed out that he was less than human. I can imagine how much he must have hated his stubborn, difficult, vile old man. In the coming hours, satellite images that appear in open sources and in classified analytical reports will capture the scale of the destruction. There are ruins where the complex used to be. Nothing else, zero, nothing, ruins. In the following hours, the U.S. and Israel continue to carry out strikes against air defense systems, radars, and key military infrastructure. Inside Iran, an emergency temporary council is being formed with 3 people. So the son, Mojtaba Khamenei, and they know that he is homosexual, but nevertheless he is appointed as the new supreme leader. I think he's easy to control, which is the reason why he was appointed, because they could manipulate him, they could put pressure on him. But the regime is trying to show the people that the leaderless period didn't last long at all, just a few hours. In military terms, what happened is called a decapitation strike. This is exactly the kind of scenario Vladimir Putin once tried to carry out during the invasion of Ukraine, counting on a lightning operation and the elimination of the leadership in Kyiv. That plan failed, but in Tehran it worked. The search for traitors. After such an operation, any power structure starts rewriting its own history. In Iran, this rewriting is happening in several directions. The military tries to present everything as if they did everything possible, but the enemy just turned out to be too strong and cunning. Hardliners like Jafari take it a step further. They try to turn the tragedy into an argument against civilian leaders. In their rhetoric, economic reforms, negotiations, attempts to ease international pressure, all of this is turned into proof of weakness. People who dealt with the economy are portrayed as surgeons who used their scalpels to cut into the body of the country. So much so that the country couldn't withstand the blow. Otherwise, it would have endured. Any attempt to say, "We tried to fix the situation," is countered with, "By fixing it, you made it weaker." Tragically, civilian leaders are in a difficult position, as I already said. On one hand, they understand that war, sanctions, and a years-long crisis can't be pinned on a single decision. On the other hand, they understand that a direct confrontation with hardliners could end not just with losing the information war, but with physical elimination. Well, that means these guys won't spend much time thinking. That's why they increasingly choose a cautious approach, vague statements, focusing on external threats, and minimizing personal arguments. And of course, they explain the same thing to Trump and the Americans. Guys, you see the situation we're in. We can't surrender to you. We would like to, but we can't. I would even say we really want to, but we can't. All this internal struggle is unfolding against the backdrop of a simple fact. The strike on the complex was prepared through hacking the city's surveillance systems, control over communications, and a deep study of the regime's behavior itself. The cherry on top. Against this backdrop, there's a parallel story in Gaza. It adds another touch to the picture. Hamas, the organization that has run the Gaza Strip for many years as its own personal domain, kind of like Hezbollah in Lebanon, right? Like their core in Iran announces that it is dissolving its government. Wow. And transfers control to a technocratic committee that is supported by the UN. Well, that is, 57 Muslim countries supported it, and the UN, like it or not, supported it too, as part of the American ceasefire deal. That is, of course, it was Trump who came up with it, naturally. The official representative of Hamas says that technical and professional staff will remain. So now they want to call their fighters technical and professional staff, who will be engaged in providing services. Well, managing hospitals, schools. They want to manage schools, under which they place their warehouses, right? And from under which they fired, and manage utility systems too. So basically, we'll be watching everything, and we'll keep weapons under schools and hospitals. What else? We'll take them out, but only for a very short time. So Hamas is trying to show that it's stepping away from political administration, but not from people's real lives. A technocratic committee comes to the forefront, which is located in Cairo, headed by engineer Alish Ad, who previously worked within the Palestinian administration. Above this entire structure, a new entity appears, the Board of Peace. So, well, what do you call it? I already said it in Russian, I forgot, right? Administration, I don't even know how to put it. The Peace Council, which was created under the leadership of the President of the United States, Donald Trump. The task of this very Peace Council is to oversee the reconstruction of Gaza and to make sure that the ceasefire turns into something more stable. International actors emphasize that the technocratic committee was working. There should be a single authority and a single security force. So, in other words, Hamas can't be left in place, right? I mean, this structure is military, right? So these are guys with weapons, that is with sticks and machine guns. They must be under the control of the authorities. Otherwise, nothing will work out again. It will be like Hezbollah and the Lebanese army again, right? The Corps and the Iranian army. Everything will be the same as before. In simple terms, this means control over weapons, over armed groups, over the ability to carry out military actions. They should be in the hands of those who govern this very region. Well, and as we suggest, it should be under the control of the Peace Council, which is under Trump's control. Hamas is trying to present all this as a positive step. Like, we are responsible, we care about the people, we are ready to step aside for the sake of reconstruction. But we are not going to leave. We will just step aside a little. So it's 1 step forward, 2 steps back, right? 1 step forward, 2 steps back. Israel is reacting with deep skepticism. Naturally, they are calling it spin, just spin. A nice package without any real substance. In their opinion, if all the Hamas people remain in place and only the sign changes, then it's way too early to talk about a real transfer of power. In fact, you can't really call it that at all. Nevertheless, the very fact that Hamas is publicly talking about dissolving the government and transferring control under international supervision is important. This shows how much pressure their movement is under. Hamas, in a world where a leader can be eliminated in a fortified compound and international organizations can dictate a region's reconstruction. Even the toughest players are forced to take steps that seemed impossible for them just yesterday. Because they really don't want to, but they have to, because otherwise they might get punished. And if they do hit you, you won't even know where it came from. For us, that's the cherry on top, ladies and gentlemen. At the same time as the elites in Tehran are accusing each other of treason and economic crimes, in Gaza, Hamas is being forced, at least verbally, to give up some of its power and control. Iran is looking for internal enemies. Hamas is trying to convince the world that it is no longer the main power in Gaza. Against this backdrop, it is clear how the balance of power in the Middle East is changing. Well, did we all imagine this 2 years ago, ladies and gentlemen? Nothing like this. I mean, it's not good yet, but it's already much better than it was before. Who will they blame tomorrow? A military operation in which Israel and the U.S. used not only planes and missiles, but also the ability to penetrate city surveillance systems, hack communication infrastructure, and turn the most secure area of the capital into a wasteland. Exactly at the moment it was needed, it's a brilliant operation. Second, the internal battle in Iran, where hardliners and the military accuse civilian leaders of causing the tragedy through their economic and political decisions, while the civilians are just trying to survive, in an atmosphere where the word traitor could be directed at them at any moment. And third, this is the story of Hamas, which, under the pressure of war, international agreements, new structures, and President Trump, is forced to formally give up part of its power in Gaza. They hope that somehow they'll manage, but they have to give it up and agree to a certain technocratic form of governance under international supervision. Who really betrayed whom? Who is actually responsible for the security failure? Who is giving up what and who will be blamed tomorrow? These questions will remain open for a long time, but that's the last thing we care about. One thing is already clear in a world where you can hack the eyes of an entire city. You can shut down communication at its very heart. Old authoritarian regimes, used to relying on concrete and fear, turn out to be much more vulnerable than they'd like to think. They live as if they're still in the century before last, even though they have all the same cell phones, all the same, devices, computers, and so on. They don't have any understanding of the new world. Let's finish our story about Iran, Hamas, survival, and so on with one question. So, what do you think will happen now? What will happen now? Because I understand that this is speculation. I understand that this is, as they say, like reading tea leaves, like, so to speak, Nostradamus. Well, I don't know, Cassandra, right? But here's what I'm curious about. In just 2 or 3 sentences, what will happen? And I'm curious, do you have an optimistic view of things or a pessimistic one, or is it just like, who the heck knows, right? But honestly, if it's just who the heck knows, then why write a comment at all? Okay, that's all. So, in your opinion, will Hamas really be able to disarm under pressure, or is this just a tactical pause before the next round? Write your prediction in the comments, okay? I'm very interested in your opinion and will reply to the most interesting ones in future videos. Well, that's it. Ladies and gentlemen, let's wrap up. If you want to understand more deeply how such processes work and why some solutions work while others don't, feel free to explore further. I have an additional channel, you probably know about it, Roadmap to Freedom. There I explain the mechanics of what's happening in detail through the lens of the science of freedom. Science, science, science. It doesn't matter what it's called. It's science, it's not an assumption, it's not just my opinion or someone else's. That's science. Parallel and straight lines, science. A right angle, so to speak, 2 points, the shortest distance, a straight line, that's science. In the same way, what I'm talking about is science, it's not an assumption. So I highly recommend downloading my book. I don't remember which one is available right now, we rotate them. After you download it, I hope you'll read it. I think it's interesting or I wouldn't have written or recommended it. So after you do that, you'll get 10 minutes every morning. We have about 192 or 193 now, I can't remember exactly. I'll add a few more and we'll finish. It'll be close to 200, or maybe we'll make it exactly 200 for fun. So I think that if you have it in the morning with your coffee, I haven't smoked in the mornings for a long time, unfortunately, for many years. But anyway, if you have a cigarette, some coffee, and listen for 10 minutes, that would be perfect. Well, how long has it been since I quit smoking? Ever since I turned 40. Yeah, well, all right, that's it. Let's finish here. Goodbye and see you next time.